Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be talking about how, get this, our kids are actually our teachers.
That's right.
Yeah. We're going to be unpacking What Our Children Teach Us by Piero Ferrucci.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about Ferrucci is that he's not just a philosopher, he's also a psychologist.
Right.
So he's coming at this from a very unique perspective. Now, this is not your typical parenting book. It's not like, how to get your kids to do their chores or anything like that.
Right.
This is about looking at those moments where you feel like, your kids are teaching you something, even if they're driving you up the wall at the same time.
Yes.
Have you ever felt that way?
Absolutely. I think all parents have those moments where their kids are, doing something that's just driving them crazy, but then there's this little flash of insight and you're like, oh, they're showing me something about myself or about life.
Yeah, exactly. And Ferrucci argues that, they really are our teachers in ways that we might not expect.
So where does he start with this whole idea?
So the first part of the book is really focused on how kids, like by their very nature,
Yeah.
embody these key principles for living a fulfilling life. And these are principles that we as adults often forget. Like one of the biggest ones is living in the present moment.
Oh, absolutely. That's something we seem to struggle with more and more as we get older, right?
Constantly reminding myself to be more present.
Yeah.
And Ferrucci uses this really great anecdote about his son, Emilio,
Okay.
to illustrate this.
Tell me about it.
So Emilio's at the playground,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Totally absorbed in practicing his jumps.
I love it.
And each jump is brand new, like
Yeah.
it's a fresh experience for him, right?
Yeah.
And Ferrucci catches himself getting distracted,
Uh-oh.
checking his watch, thinking about other things he needs to do.
Yeah.
And of course, Emilio, like any good teacher, calls him out on it.
What does he say?
He's like, Daddy, watch. It's a new jump.
Right.
Like, hey, wake up.
Be here with me.
Be here with me. Experience this with me.
Mhm.
And it's so simple, but it's such a powerful reminder.
It is. It makes you think about how, kids approach new experiences with this pure, unadulterated joy. Do you remember the last time you felt that as an adult?
Oh, it's so rare.
I know. And Ferrucci is arguing that tapping into that childlike wonder can help us rediscover the joy in everyday moments.
It reminds me of the concept of a flow state. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah. That's that feeling of complete absorption in an activity where time just seems to disappear.
And kids seem to access that so effortlessly.
They do. And, research has actually shown that achieving a flow state has all sorts of benefits. It reduces stress, it increases creativity, it gives you a sense of fulfillment.
Wow.
So Emilio is giving us a masterclass in mindfulness without even realizing it.
That's amazing. But it's a little unrealistic to expect adults to be as present as children, right?
Right. We have jobs, responsibilities, a million things swirling around in our heads. It's not about becoming carefree like a child. It's more about incorporating moments of mindful presence into our day.
So what would that look like?
Even just truly listening when your child is telling you about their day.
Oh, okay.
Putting your phone down.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Engaging with them fully, even if it's just for 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's a good reminder. I think another thing that adults really struggle with is letting go of control, which is something that kids seem to do naturally. And this leads to another key point that Ferrucci makes,
Okay, what's that?
which is that respect and trust require space.
Right.
He realized that his attempts to kind of micromanage his children's behavior, even with the best intentions, were actually stifling their growth.
That makes sense.
It's about recognizing that they have their own inner wisdom and they need the freedom to explore and express themselves authentically.
So it's not about controlling them.
No.
It's about giving them that space to figure things out on their own.
And he tells this really poignant story about how this realization shifted his entire relationship with his son, Emilio,
Okay.
who was, going through a phase of kind of picking on his younger brother.
Oh, yeah.
And Ferrucci kept trying to correct the behavior by saying things like, I love you very much, but T, you need to stop doing that.
Right. The classic but.
And Emilio, being incredibly perceptive, recognized the conditionality of that love.
Wow.
He said, I knew you would say but.
Oh.
It's such a simple statement, but it's so profound. It forced Ferrucci to really confront how his words were impacting his son.
And that raises a really important question for all of us. Think about the expectations you place on the children in your life. Are you allowing them the space to be themselves, even if it means making mistakes? Or are you constantly trying to mold them into your own image of what they should be?
Right, and Ferrucci then makes a conscious decision to love Emilio unconditionally, like without buts.
Okay.
And remarkably, Emilio's behavior begins to shift.
Wow. So he really responded to that. It's a beautiful illustration of how respecting a child individuality, even when it's challenging, can actually lead to positive transformation.
Right.
It's not about letting them run wild. It's about providing that safe and supportive environment where they can develop their own sense of self.
Right, and this idea of spontaneity and letting go of control comes up again in the story about Ferrucci struggling to get the perfect picture of Jonathan's smile.
Okay. What happened?
The more he tried to orchestrate the moment, the more Jonathan resisted.
Yeah.
It's only when he surrenders to the moment, letting go of his expectations, that Jonathan's authentic smile shines through.
So it's like by trying to control it, he was actually preventing it from happening.
Exactly. And this realization about letting go of control leads to an even deeper point that Ferrucci explores. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, hit me with it.
He suggests that children don't just teach us.
Oh.
They actually reflect who we are.
Wow, okay. I'm intrigued. So it's
Yeah.
like they hold up a mirror, revealing aspects of ourselves we might not always see.
Exactly. And sometimes what we see is not so pretty.
Oh, I bet. That can be both enlightening and a bit uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely. So children are like mirrors reflecting back at us. That's pretty profound.
It is, and it can be pretty confronting, too.
I bet. What does Ferrucci say about how this mirror thing actually plays out?
Well, he's really honest about the fact that even with his background as a psychologist, he wasn't always the calm, rational person he thought he was.
So even he had blind spots.
We all do, right?
Yeah.
And guess who triggered those unexpected moments of anger and frustration for him?
Let me guess. His kids.
His kids, exactly.
I think any parent listening can relate to that. It's like they have a radar for our buttons, don't they?
They do. He shares this one story about almost calling his son Emilio a sadist.
Wow, okay. That's intense. What happened?
Emilio said, "Serves you right," when Ferrucci accidentally hurt himself.
Ouch.
And Ferrucci was so taken aback by this seemingly callous response, but then it hit him. He'd indirectly taught Emilio not to show compassion when someone's in pain.
That must have been a tough pill to swallow. I mean, it really shows how children can reflect back those shadow sides of ourselves, the parts we might not want to acknowledge.
Absolutely. We all have those shadow sides, but we tend to project this idealized image of ourselves. And children have this amazing way of cutting through that facade.
So they see right through us.
They do. So it's not just about learning from their positive qualities like living in the moment. It's also about paying attention to how they trigger us, how they make us react in ways that surprise us.
Because those reactions, even the ones that are less than ideal, can be so revealing.
They are. Think of it as a gift even.
Yeah.
Once we become aware of those less than ideal parts of ourselves, we can start to work on them. That's where the real growth happens.
But let's be real. It's not always easy to confront those shadow sides, is it?
No, it's not. But it's worth it. Ferrucci doesn't shy away from the fact that parenting can be really tough, even for a psychologist like him.
That's reassuring in a way, right?
I think so. He's not trying to sugarcoat the difficulties. He's honest about the fact that there will be times when you're exhausted, frustrated, and you just don't know what to do.
So even he felt that way sometimes.
He did. But he also says that even in those tough moments, there's an opportunity for learning and growth.
There's always a silver lining.
There is.
Yeah.
He talks about how his children forced him to become more creative and resourceful in his problem solving. He had to think outside the box to find solutions that worked for everyone.
You have a favorite example of that?
Well, there's that story about Emilio insisting on having a boiled egg when Ferrucci had already started making scrambled eggs.
Oh, right. I remember that one. Classic kid move. What did he do?
Well, he could have gotten into a power struggle, right?
Mm-hmm.
But instead,
He pulls a rabbit out of his hat.
he comes up with this imaginative story that distracts Emilio and resolves the situation peacefully.
That is so clever. It's such a good example of how parenting requires us to be flexible, adaptable. Those are valuable skills for life in general, not just for parenting.
Right. It's not about having all the answers. It's about being open to new ways of seeing things, finding creative solutions. Now, I know Ferrucci also talks about the importance of willpower in parenting.
He does. He's very honest about the fact that it's so easy to just give in to your child's demands when you're tired or stressed. But he argues that consistency and setting boundaries are essential for their development.
So it's about making those conscious choices, even when it would be easier to just give in.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that true love sometimes mean saying no, not out of anger or a desire to control, but out of a deep understanding of what's best for them in the long run. It's about teaching through our own example.
So it's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Right. Kids are always watching and learning from us even when we don't realize it.
It's a big responsibility.
It is,
Yeah.
but it's also an incredible privilege. So to recap what we've explored so far, children teach us about being present, they reflect back who we are, and they challenge us to grow in ways we never thought possible.
And if we're open to it, the experience of parenting can be a truly profound journey of self-discovery and transformation. It can teach us so much about ourselves, our values, and the kind of people we want to be in the world.
Yeah, it really is amazing to think about how much we can learn from our kids, even when they're driving us crazy.
Right, like there's these little Zen masters in disguise.
Yeah, exactly. They're
Right.
pushing us towards growth, whether we like it or not.
And the thing I love about Ferrucci's book is that he doesn't just present these ideas in this theoretical way.
Mm-hmm.
Like he actually gives us practical guidance on how to apply these lessons and become better parents, better partners, better humans.
Okay, so what are some of those practical takeaways? Where do we go from here with all these insights?
Well, one of the things he really emphasizes is tapping into our inner wisdom.
Inner wisdom.
Okay. Yeah, that innate capacity we all have to navigate tricky situations with creativity and compassion and perspective.
Okay, I'll admit that inner wisdom thing, it's a little abstract for me. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, think back to that story about the scrambled eggs versus boiled egg conflict with Emilio.
Oh, yeah?
Instead of getting locked into a power struggle, Ferrucci, told a story that subtly shifted Emilio's focus and allowed for this peaceful resolution.
Right, he didn't force his will on Emilio, but he also didn't just cave.
Exactly.
He found this middle ground, this solution that respected both his own needs and his son's desires.
That's such a good example of inner wisdom in action.
It is, and it's not just about parenting. It's about approaching any challenging situation with that same flexible, open mind.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the most effective solutions come from a place of understanding and creative problem solving, not from rigidity and control.
It's funny. I've always been struck by how kids are constantly asking why.
Yeah.
It's like they're hardwired to question everything, right?
Maybe that's part of what helps them stay so open to new possibilities.
It could be.
They haven't yet learned to limit themselves with all these preconceived notions about how things should be.
That's a good point. And it actually reminds me of another important point Ferrucci makes about strengthening our will.
Okay. Willpower.
He's really honest about the fact that he sometimes falls into the trap of taking the easy way out, especially when he's tired.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there. It's so tempting to just give in when you're exhausted. But he's saying that's not always the best approach.
Right. He acknowledges that parenting by its very nature requires us to make tough choices, set boundaries, stick to them, even when it would be easier to just give in. And it's not about being authoritarian or controlling.
Okay.
It's about being clear about our values and having the willpower to actually align our actions with those values, even when it's hard.
So it's about teaching by example.
Exactly.
Showing our kids that we can be strong and consistent even when we're tempted to take the easy way out.
Right. It's about modeling those qualities we want to see in them. And recognizing that sometimes true love means saying no.
Not because you're angry.
Not out of anger, not out of a desire to control, but out of this deep understanding of what's truly best for our children.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive.
It has.
We've covered so much ground, from the importance of living in the moment, to the power of seeing our kids as our teachers, to this whole idea of strengthening our own will.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It has. What are some key things you hope our listener will take away from this exploration?
I think the biggest takeaway is that our children offer us these incredible opportunities for growth. They teach us about the simple joy of being present. They hold up a mirror to our strengths and our weaknesses, and they challenge us to become the best versions of ourselves.
And they do it every single day.
They do. Parenting is hard. There's no doubt about it.
Wow.
But it's also incredibly rewarding if we approach it with an open mind and a willingness to learn and to grow alongside our children.
I love that. So to our listener out there, here's a final thought to ponder. What might you learn from the children in your life if you approach them as teachers? Mirrors guides on your own journey of growth. We'd love to hear your reflections. Until next time, keep diving deep.